We are about to embark on introduction basically to culture. And as we move forward, this segment pertaining to religion. But as we get ready for the Middle East, basically next week, we're going to start with the monotheistic religions and stick with just the three monotheistics for now, as we will get into a couple of the other major religions when we get to that neck of the woods. So, without further ado, the three monotheistic religions of the world. All right, so religion and its effect on culture. The unit technically is on culture. So religion has kind of reflected culture throughout history, throughout art, architecture, movies, books, politics, all have been influenced by religion and through the study of religion. So there have been times in our history, of course, where religion played a more prominent role than it does today, but still in our political world, there's quite a bit of influence of religion. So Da Vinci's Last Supper just shows you some of a storyline, or one of the main key components of the Western Christianity storyline, depicting the disciples, the apostles to Christ in his final days. One of the more famous pieces of art. I've had an opportunity to see this piece of art in the Louvre Museum in Paris, and it was much smaller than I thought it was going to be, but still, pretty fascinating considering the topic and the artist. One of the more famous paintings in the world. Historically, of course, religion has played a major role in shaping the world, the Western world, or the Eastern world for that matter. The Crusades are still thought of as kind of a pivotal event of history, leading to Western domination in the world. And one of my deployments to the Middle East, I've been referred to as a crusader even today by some of the Muslim countries. We're viewed as crusaders, still trying to spread our version of religion to their world, and not necessarily used in a friendly manner. All right, so to be referred as crusaders, of course, goes back historically to Western Christianity trying to retake or conquer the Holy Land. So, if you guys were to take notes as I go through this, there are a few items that I'll just kind of highlight that you'll more than likely have to be responsible for down the road. This is not necessarily one of those slides. However, I would take a look at Martin Luther at some point. I may talk more about Luther and the counter-revolution. I know that's more of a a world history or Western Civ topic. But as far as the Crusades are concerned, that's twice now that they've been mentioned. And so I would at least just have a working knowledge of what the Crusades were. And again, that's the Western Christianity trying to retake the Holy Land, Jerusalem, from Muslim control. And that, we're talking 1095. That event in history, those events, there's several of the Crusades, are going to influence really our relationship for the next millennium. All right. Some of the basics, and these again, more than likely in a midterm, scenario, you'll have some of these questions. Monotheism, of course, is the belief in one God, supreme being, and of the three primary monotheistics, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are the primary monotheistics. Polytheistic, the belief in several or many gods. Um, Hinduism, certainly. Buddhism, not so much polytheistic as it is a way of life. Buddhism is not necessarily a true religion because there's no supreme being. Buddha or Siddhartha Gautama was a human being that reaches a certain level of existence and is held to a higher standard, but not necessarily a god. And then you have your traditional or animistic religions. Now, I have a Native American background, and um, in the Europeans' quest for um, expansion into the New World and into North America, um, they reached many heights and many lows. As at that time, my grandmother back in the early 1900s was raised on an Indian reservation, and the culture at that time, the Western Christian culture, wanted to strip the natives of their animistic beliefs and their traditional beliefs, and basically impart in them the importance of Christianity. And of course, that meant the cutting of my grandmother's hair, her braids, which have certain meaning within the Native American community, and taking them of their native clothing and dressing them in Western wear. Now that was all in the name of saving the savages, so to speak, um, not condoning that behavior, but understanding that that was the mindset at that time for the Western culture as they expand across our continent. And then one of the more interesting aspects of religion is the atheists, or the non-believers, which is a pretty significant portion of our population, and had been one of the faster growing segments of the population. I think with the struggle of the Catholic Church in the last decade or so has kind of highlighted the need for some, I don't know, rethought or rethinking of the Catholic Church and the other Christian religions to kind of reassert a need for converts. And I think atheism is kind of a direct reflection of that. Now, atheism is just a belief in that there is no supreme being. Many atheists are still spiritual in nature or have certain beliefs, but not in a higher order or a higher power. All right, and historically, the Christian faith is still the largest denomination out there as far as religions, world religions. Um, Islam is the fastest moving, fastest growing faith in the world. But this gives you a pretty good depiction of where religions are around the world. Of course, based solely off of population numbers, if you think of Hinduism and India and that surrounding area, sheer numbers, they do well, but very regional. Christianity is very much a worldwide religion, and Islam is delving into that aspect of religion and faith and belief, becoming more global. All right. As far as Judaism is concerned and the Jewish faith, predominantly, Israel, the Jewish state. We'll talk about Israel quite extensively in this class, so you should be aware of Israel and the fact that it was created out of the Holy Land and in order to become a citizen of Israel as a member of the Jewish faith. You may be granted land or territory or a home just for moving to Israel if you are of the Jewish faith. The United States has the second largest population, and then you see Europe and the rest of the world. So not a large segment overall. Of course, many of you are familiar with the Holocaust and the results of the Holocaust and the extermination of nearly 6 million Jews worldwide at that time, which really leads to the creation of the state of Israel. But we'll get into that later. This historically is the Holy Land, and the story, of course, comes from Jacob. Jacob, who has conversations with the Archangel Gabriel, will eventually be renamed Israel, and these are the 12 tribes of Israel, or his 12 sons, and where they took root in modern day Israel. So this is where their footprint begins. It's biblical. It's the modern day Jerusalem and modern day Israel. You see the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, so you get an idea of where we are geographically, and then the sons of Israel settle in this region, and this is where the Jews point to as the beginning of their influx or claim to this territory. All right, so in the Old Testament, so we're talking 2,500 years ago or more. All right, the oldest of the monotheistics, probably need to know that. God makes a covenant with Abraham, who is considered the father of the Jewish people, or the Hebrews. Again, you hear the term Hebrew interchangeably. Hebrew, of course, is a language group of the Jewish faith. And then some of the aspects of being Jewish: circumcision, the sacrifice of Isaac, or his son anyway, to Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is still a critical point in Jerusalem and to the story of the Jews. All right, and then the building of two temples, historic temples, one by Solomon, one by Herod, the destruction of those temples, and the promise to the Jewish people that a Messiah will be sent to save the Jews, the chosen people, and the rebuilding of the temples at that time. All right, Moses is another key to the Jewish faith. He will lead the Jews out of Egypt. I'm certain you're familiar with the stories, the Ten Commandments, the Ark of the Covenant, that storyline from the Old Testament. So that is the Jewish Testament. So the Old Testament technically is the Jewish Testament. And those first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, as the Torah, or one of the key scriptures of the Jewish faith. So that is combined, of course, with the Christian Bible, but we'll get to that. All right, so there's the Torah, the first 5 books of the First Testament, or the Jewish Testament, or the Old Testament. The Torah outlines what it is like to be a Jew, or what you need to do as standards of conduct, basically, and lays out the Jewish rules and regulations. The Talmud is another of the books of the Jewish faith. Again, is more customary, more cultural, about what it means, what the customs and courtesies are as a Jew. A place of worship is usually referred to as a synagogue or a temple. their officials, rabbi, and then cantors or singers or prayer leaders. Rabbis are basically teachers or spiritual leaders. All right, so those are terms that you probably should know for testable purpose reasons. All right, and some of their beliefs. Now, by the way, a true Jew would not utter the word God, so that's why you don't see it spelled out in this slide deck. And as stated before, they believe that the Messiah will be sent to build the third temple and to take the Hebrews to the Holy Land. Most of you have heard of the term Shabbat. So Shabbat, or the holy time for Jews, or the most holy day of the week, is usually Friday evening until Saturday night. So that is when they observe rest and just time to reflect and spend time with God. The term Yahweh is sometimes used as the name of the Jewish God. Literally means Lord in the Hebrew. And then, is there a life after death? It says there isn't anything after life because life never ends. It just goes higher and higher. The soul is liberated from the body and returns closer to her source than ever before. All right, so that's an interesting concept from the Jewish faith of Jerusalem. So the old city of Jerusalem, which has some of the most significant religious sites in the world. And you see some of them here, the Al-Aqsa Mosque or the Dome of the Rock. That's the site of Abraham's sacrifice or potential sacrifice of Isaac. It is also the site where in the Muslim faith they believe Muhammad ascended to heaven and met Allah and some of the other prophets of other faiths. You see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre over here, which is the site of the crucifixion of Christ. You see what are called the Stations of the Cross. So this is the path that Jesus actually walked to his crucifixion. And they have, as you walk through, and that's mostly in the Muslim sector, as you walk the path of Christ in the holy or the old Jerusalem, they have placards that kind of describe what's going on. You can take tours there, of course, but if you're not going to take the tour, you can actually walk the steps, and it explains the story and the path and what was going on at the time as far as Jesus was concerned. Also within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, not only is it, there's two domes there. So you have one where the site of the crucifixion was, and then the site of his burial. So both of those sites are within that church, and you can actually touch the stone that they bathed Jesus's body after he was taken off the cross. So it's I don't care how religious you are, if you decide to go to the old city of Jerusalem, there's if you're just a history junkie, there are things that are pretty powerful. The site of the Last Supper is there. There's Golgotha. There's so much there for all faiths, really, if you ever get an opportunity. All right, what they depicted as looking at the Second Temple, what the Second Temple looked like, and then the Jewish Temple Mount as it looks today, the Golden Dome. So this is a mosque. That's Al-Aqsa Mosque. So again, the site where they believe Muhammad ascended to heaven. The Western Wall, are referred to as the Wailing Wall, which they believe is part of the original Second Temple, and is the holiest, if not one of the holiest, if not the holiest site in the Jewish religion. Pilgrims go there every day and pray for the Messiah to arrive. And you can wear a kippah, or you can get a paper covering, basically, to honor the Jewish faith before you go to the wall. But even as a Christian or a Muslim, you can go to the wall and pray. You can also, it's custom to write out a thought, or a prayer, or a message to Yahweh, and then you can place it in the wall. And there's literally millions of messages in the Wailing Wall. It also shows you. So this is the Wailing Wall down here, and then in order to get up to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, you have to go up this ramp. So the Al-Aqsa Mosque, of course, is predominantly a Muslim site, even though the Temple Mount itself has some Jewish history as well. But they have built this walkway here to kind of keep separate the Jews and the Muslims that may not always see eye to eye. But when you're in the holy city of the old city, they try to maintain peace and order. But there's palpable tension, I guess you would say, palpable tension when you're in this part of the old city. All right, symbols of Judaism, of course, the Star of David, King David. Yes, that David, of David and Goliath. You see the badges from the Holocaust period that, of course, they were forced to wear, because looking at somebody, unless they are a Hasidic or traditional Jew, you wouldn't know if they were Jewish or not. So the Nazis had to force them to identify themselves. And then, of course, the menorah, which is part of their Hanukkah holiday festival. All right, I cannot discuss Judaism and the establishment of the Jewish faith without discussing Palestinians. So Palestinians, now the term Palestine technically is a biblical reference to this region of the world of Palestine. And Palestinian hasn't always meant Muslim, because remember, Islam is not till 500 to 600s after Christ. So at the time of the biblical time, Palestine is just Arab citizens of this region and non-Jewish, I guess, inhabitants of this area. The Jews, of course, are going to, they were at one time Palestinian or from this region historically, but as their belief system evolved, they became Hebrews or Jews that started to settle in this territory. But they're not the only people in that territory indigenous to that region. So the Jews and the Palestinians consider themselves indigenous to this region. And the Jewish claim is, of course, of the time of Abraham and Isaac, or Jacob, and the 12 tribes, and 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, that have laid claim to this specific territory. Fast forward then to the time of World War II, and the last true major persecution of the Jews, even though they've been persecuted throughout their history. The most prominent and destructive example, of course, is the Holocaust. And after the Holocaust, if you look at the timeline here, 1947, the Zionists, or those from the Jewish faith that had always felt that they needed their own state with a capital S. Looked to this region to establish a state for the Jewish people to have their own homeland. It just so happens, however, that in order to gain that homeland, they are going to have to carve it out of Palestinian territory. So these Arab Muslims at this time, but historically, they're the Arabs from this region that live in that territory as well. But now they were going to be forced, basically, uh, not necessarily all are going to be forced to leave, but a large number of Arab Muslim Palestinians will be forced from their homes and resettled into the surrounding areas. Now, originally, the United Nations, which was created after World War II, so this is a brand new international organization that is telling these Arab, Muslim, Palestinian people, hey, this new state is going to be created and we're going to take it out of your land. You have to adjust. So there's a period of adjustment that eventually leads to war. So the Israeli state is created. Not all of the surrounding Arab nations agree with the creation of the Jewish state, and they take up arms against Israel. Now, Israel historically has defeated the Arab states every time they create or start a war against them. And every time the Israelis are successful in their wars, they take more and more territory, originally delegated to the Palestinian people. And this is kind of the starting point, if you will, of modern Palestinian Jewish resentment revolving around territory. Yep. So 1947, the Palestine Mandate is going to be, which was a territory reserved for Palestinian Muslim Arabs, is going to be split in half, basically. Israel will be created out of that mandate, and a Muslim majority Arab state is also created. It's not called Palestine, but it's something for the Palestinian people. Jerusalem itself, the old city, will be controlled by the United Nations, considered kind of a free city. However, over the years of wars, 48, 56, 67, 73, 2000, I guess you would call the intifadas that come up, wars as well. But in time after time, the Jews are attacked by the surrounding neighboring hostile Muslim countries and defeat the Arabs and continue to take more territory as a result. All right, so here's a list of 5 groups of people that consider themselves Palestinian, who are considered Palestinians today. And this is the crux of the conflict between the Jews and the Palestinians. I'll just leave it there. And I will end there, and I will have a second separate segment on Christianity.